guys, welcome back to the Strength Collective, where we talk about all things health and fitness with us.
Sprinkling.
All things health and fitness with a sprinkle of strength. My name's Tammy, that cute guy top left, or is it top left for you? Alex, you take over.
Yeah, I'm Alex again.
Ben.
Chris.
And who's that gorgeous, handsome guy right at the bottom with a snapback backwards with a Bulls vest on? Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, it's cool, isn't it? It's a Jordan reissue. I don't know if you can see it. There we go. I'm Alex Ferentino. So I used to play rugby with Chris, and I've known the other Alex and Chris for a few years through fitness and rugby and all of that jazz. Alex mentioned about coming on to have a chat with you guys on the podcast, see if I can talk about any interesting stuff to do with food and nutrition and things like that with you guys. So it's really cool for you lot inviting me on. Thank you.
So what position did you play in rugby?
I played sevens, I played league, I played union, so depending on which one. I played hooker and open side in 15s. I played a bit of scrum half in league, and then when I went back to union for a bit, I went there, which is seems like a weird move for a guy built like a hooker or open side, but my hands are decent. So then when I played sevens, usually prop or hooker, but I could kind of go anywhere because I could line out throws, and that was quite useful. Like a lot of sevens players are all like wingers, so when you've got someone that can actually like throw a ball in, things like that can be useful. But I could kick all my own goals as well, so I just tried to be a good all rounder. I just love the game. Like you get a lot of like Northerners that will go like, oh, try and tell you how crap union is, or like I like all forms of the game. I think all three of the formats are class. Sevens is probably my favorite though. Like I said, that's where I know Chris from with their mad side steps. I remember before I knew Chris, we saw a team play and we were just like, who is that kid with the massive quads and the mega side step? He's class. And then got to know him, and we ended up playing on the same team for a while. So that was cool.
So going back to your sporting days, is that when your love of nutrition came about, or?
Yeah, pretty much. I was a swimmer when I was a kid. Grew up in a coastal town, and every year there'd be something in the papers, some kid drowned or something like that. And I guess my godfather never wanted that for any of like his extended family, so he took us all to swimming lessons in the mornings, like before school and things like that. I hated it when I was a kid. Absolutely hated swimming. I wouldn't even put my head under the water. Like this was when I was like 4 or 5, and then fast forward to when I was like 9 or 10. I was one of the quickest swimmers in the county for my age, and it just all came naturally. There's other stuff later in life where I've really had to try out, like rugby particularly. Rugby never came naturally. I had to just literally spend hours in the field kicking a ball, throwing a ball, to get up to scratch, away from training, like team training. So yeah, because I was swimming, there was always an interest in, I used to like fueling up on Italian food, and that's kind of stuck around. So I had the nickname Garfield for a while. The way Garfield like just lives on lasagna. So I used to like my spaghetti and lasagna and things like that to carb load and get some protein in. And then as I got older, I realized that everything you do with your physique, whether that's for sporting performance or if it's aesthetic or for strength, a lot of that is built on how you feed a body. So I think for a few years I went down the wrong path and went very boring and just force fed myself chicken all the time. And then I got a bit further down the road and I realized, no, there's ways you can hit these sound intake targets, but making the food nice. So then I started trying to do seminars on how to hit targets and how to cook better and things like that. I went around the UK and Ireland with them for a few years, and probably helped out a few thousand people, I guess.
No, that's absolutely awesome. So what is your title or your job kind of description? How would you describe your job description and your title?
I actually pulled away from fitness a few years ago. I still keep a few clients on the side, but I guess I was never one for fancy titles. I just called myself a coach. So, but I would work with fighters on their diets. I'd work with powerlifters on their diets, bodybuilders, bikini bikini competitors, rugby players, anything like that. But then also do, like, one of my main things as a trainer, I didn't used to necessarily do a lot of one-on-one personal training. It was more seminars and workshops and clinics and things like that, whatever people like to call them. So I would, if it was a physique competitor, you know, like somebody who's going to get on the stage to do bikini or figure or bodybuilding, that kind of thing, they'd show me all their like standout body parts or the bits that lagged, and I'd look at how they train and then try and usually there's like a direct correlation to muscles that are lagging and not working them out of a deep stretch or moving through the right paths, like in terms of how in tune that is with anatomical functions and things like that. And normally it's pretty easy to tune that up for people and then reallocate some volume. Often you find people's strong body parts, they tend to do a lot more sets than they need to, and they can dial that back and, you know, like a seesaw kind of thing, and dial that back and reallocate the volume for the lagging body part, but with better movement. And then, you know, come that off season, the end of that off season, they'd normally have brought those things up quite well. Like I had people with like missing rear delts just build like best in class rear delts and things like that, or people with missing glutes kind of, you know, build up massive glutes and things like that. So it was just all through attention to anatomy and attention to matching up how the food should match up a diet. There's a lot of misconceptions, you know, like a lot of people will put their protein lower when they diet and it should be higher, things like that. So, and then a lot of people feel they're protected from losing muscle by drinking BCAAs in the morning. And again, that's not so. So it's just a case of trying to align everything to how the body actually works. And then magically you've got these hacks, but they're not hacks, it's just physiology.
So guys, I'm going to throw this out to everybody. In terms of, we've all been athletes, we're all athletes. Some of us are, yeah, we could say we're all athletes. I'm looking at Alex like, yeah, can I call you Alex athlete? You are still an athlete. So, you know, we've all kind of gone through that diet, whether cutting to make weight or just changing the way we eat to benefit our training. How do you guys feel about that? And how do you guys feel about the word diet? I'm going to throw that out to you guys. Who wants to go first? Don't make me pick, because you know,
Yeah, I'll go.
No, I'm going. He knew I was coming to him.
So, I mean, diet to me just describes a way of eating, right? So even if you're not on a diet, you're still on a diet, right? Your diet is just a description of what you're eating. It's like if you're just going to the gym to train, like you're still periodizing stuff. It's just shit, right? The actual word is meaningless. Yeah, it can have this negative connotation to it, where you're like, our diet has to be restrictive. But that's just people's interpretation. It's not like inherent to the word. In terms of having to diet for competition or anything like that, yeah, I'm not the right one to ask. Yeah.
I'm going to throw it to you, Chris, because obviously you guys have weight class in weightlifting in terms of your athletes, because I know you've got quite a lot of females as well. And what's your viewpoint on the whole diet culture for athletes, not the traditional diet culture for your average Joe?
I think going from like rugby into weightlifting was like quite a shock, because like with rugby it's basically just a case of try and get a bit more protein, like actually hydrate yourself, maybe think about like something like, you know, taking some creatine or even like zinc or magnesium, just some kind of joint support or recovery support. But it was very like no one's on you to lose weight and to diet, no one's on you to be in a certain weight class and to cut weight and starve yourself. Whereas with weightlifting is a case of, and I think in general population as well, there's a very kind of like probably like very narrow term for what a diet is. Like Alex is saying, it's describing the way that you eat. It's a way of eating. Whereas when you talk to someone in weightlifting about, okay, let's talk about your diet, like some of the guys that I talk to, like, oh, like I don't have a diet. Like what I eat is just shit. It's like, well, no, your diet is shit. So if we sort it out and you get a better diet, then it's fine. Do you know what I mean? But most of them assume, the guys especially, as soon as you say diet, that's a case of you're switching from I'm just eating, I'm going to try and eat fairly healthy, to no, now we've got an actual plan to cut you down. And with the girls, it's kind of the same. I think a lot of them have been very good. They work with some decent nutritionists. Like they all work with like basically the same too. And one of them is quite big on basically being like, we're going to actually set you up with a decent relationship with food, so you understand when you're cutting for a competition, you're cutting for a purpose, for just to tick the box to get into your weight class. Whereas before, some of them would like cut down to like from 64 to 59, and then they'd start to get upset when they go back up to 64, when it's like, no, you were literally starving yourself for those last 2 or 3 kilos to come off, which is obviously an issue.
I'm going to throw it to you, Alex F.
Okay. So I kind of agree with the other two. That diet is just the word for, just to sum up what people eat, how they eat. It doesn't necessarily have to have this inherent evil behind it. I think there's a big trend in the London fitness scene of being, I'm kicking the hornet's nest here.
Do it.
Just do it. No. So, Alex, just so you understand, literally, it's a group of like-minded people having a conversation. Be as open and honest as possible.
Yeah.
Like, no one is going to tell us anything. They can't tell us.
I already
it's
know what you're
true.
going to say. I think I already know what you're going to say.
Yeah, I bet you do. There's a trend of being anti-diet, which to me is like, I just don't understand it. It's like having a dog and being anti-vet. Like, what? I just don't get it. And then that also seems to go hand in hand now with healthy at every size. We know that's not possible.
You know, since you want to talk about that was not on our topic to discuss.
Yeah.
But let's throw it out there, because this is something that I get passionate about.
Yeah.
Being healthy at every size. Do you guys honestly think that you could be healthy at every size?
No,
Not at all.
Absolutely not.
It wasn't me that said it. I didn't say it.
But that's my point, that the word diet, because now it's trendy, there's literally an anti-diet culture movement, and that links into the healthy at every size camp. Obviously, that's put a negative connotation on the word diet in mainstream, sort of London fitness circles, and maybe the mainstream too, to a degree. But I mean, well, maybe, because there's Cosmopolitan and stuff like that, big Tess Holiday on the cover. I don't see anything wrong with that. If she's a plus size model and they want to put models of different sizes on, like, yeah, fine. But I don't think they claimed she was healthy. Like they just put her up there. They didn't claim she was healthy.
The problem with the whole Tess aspect, though, was the fact that she claims some days to be healthy, and then some days she claims that she's unhealthy. And I think that's the frustrating thing, especially in the YouTube world, that a lot of trainers have with individuals like Tessa, because she has this body positivity kind of like, I love myself, this is who I am, and I'm healthy, Whereas we all know as ex-athletes, athletes, and coaches that anything to the extreme is unhealthy.
I mean, you can just define it by links to all-cause morbidity, right? Like, if something makes you more likely to die from any reason, probably not the healthiest thing in the world. But I mean, I don't know how you could disagree with that. Like,
yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. Like the more overweight and the less active you get, the closer you're going to be to death, essentially. Like, there's obviously different things that are going to maybe like produce more of a risk on your health, but in terms of like just by being higher in body fat percentage and higher in weight overall in combination is ridiculously unhealthy. Like, I usually use my family in America as an example. Not all of them, because I know some of them will then might hear this and then fucking message me in a mood. But some of them, like, they started to have health problems out of nowhere when they like finish college and get into their later adulthood and start getting very, very large. And they'll start to get random health problems that they think have just popped out of nowhere. But it's like, well, you have those issues, then you started exercising and dieting, and then they went away. It's funny that. But like, I don't think, like Alex is saying, when they put people like Tess Daly on the cover of like Cosmo and stuff, if they're not saying this is really healthy, you have to accept this as being healthy, then I don't think there's an issue. I think it's more, if you're going to be that large, you just need to know the health risks that are going to come with it. It's the same as if you're going to go out and drink or go out and smoke or choose not to eat healthy and you're going to choose to eat McDonald's all the time. Like, as long as you know the risks that are associated with it, you know what choice you're making. Whereas when you're telling some people that, like, if you just balloon up to whatever size, don't exercise, and you just, don't bother watching your food, you're going to be fine. That's not true for everyone. Like, someone's going to get diabetes and get gout, whereas one person's not going to. Do you know what I mean? So it's just, it's the balancing of the information for me. Like, it's not so much the choice people are making. It's like, balance it. Don't make it seem like not being on a diet and being sloppy is okay, because
I think
Being
that
it's not.
I think you just hit the nail on the head, and especially coming from an ethnic background, people in West Africa generally do not understand that concept. So hence why diabetes and gout is very, very high in our community. Especially for myself, I can count on literally two hands the amount of my family members that suffer from diabetes, high blood pressure, and gout. And they still don't want to change their eating habits because they think, it's automatically just going to go away if, I just put my head in the sand and not actually acknowledge that there's a problem. So I'm going to throw this at you, Ben, right? In your rogue, in your rogue top.
The beard's back for you as well, Tim.
I know, I love a beard. In terms of, because I know you and Mo are cut as well, quite often, right? In terms of the food and making food taste great and enjoyable, how do you think that plays such a key part in an athlete or just an everyday person's program? Because if you're a bodybuilder, what do they generally eat? Rice and a little bit of rice, sweet potato, vegetables, and dry chicken. But nutrition can be fun and exciting.
I think, do you know what? It's interesting. You mentioned this, Tim. We had this exact conversation the other day. And it was around the whole bodybuilder eating culture versus what we do as powerlifters. And I think certainly in the UK, and again, this is only my view on it, but it's the ability to be able to cook, one, healthily, two, with your macros, and three, tastily, that some people just do not understand. They think that you need to go and buy, spices in a packet or pre-made sauces in order to make your chicken taste nice. But you turn around the bottle and the jar's got all this stuff in. You're like, I'm not eating any of that because it doesn't fit my macros. So you put it to one side and you eat the dried chicken. Well, just eaten tonight, some nice roast chicken there, plain it and itself, got a few jars of spices out that have got minimum in terms of stuff that you don't want in your macros, so that you're not exceeding in any given day. But yet that bit of chicken then goes from a nice dry bit of chicken to something with a little bit of flavour. And it's understanding what you need to put in your body, and that actually you also need to educate yourself on how to then prepare that meal. Anyone can fry a bit of chicken up or throw a bit of chicken in the oven, but there is so many ways, and actually, while we're on it, cost-effective ways of cooking tastily whilst hitting your macros. And I think there's almost two sides to the coin here, right? There is knowing what macros you need to put into your body, and then educating yourself on how to cook that piece of meat, to fit in with your diet in order to make it taste good without having to pick up a Dolmio jar off the counter that then puts you over your macros. And that's a fact, right? And I have to say, British people in general are really bad at it. And I think it's another step of education that people do need to take. On the whole cutting point as well, I think, it's an interesting point having Moa as that sort of, junior international athlete now coming to the seniors, trying to get herself back into that sort of that world. And like, where do you sit building up that muscle mass for her to perform at the right levels? But it's getting down to a weight that you're comfortable dieting down, because it's then got to be enjoyable for yourself as well. And for me personally, I can then do a water cut on top of that. It doesn't work for everybody. I've only done the one most recently, but it worked an absolute dream, and I'll be doing it again in the future. But I think it's people understanding the two sides to the coin, educating themselves, and there is a bit of trial and error, right? And I'm sure everyone on here, and Alex, you're joining in. There's not one answer that works for everybody. The science may say this is what you need, but then the good nutritionist, the good coach needs to tweak and adjust. And that's the same for any, whether it be diet, that was, as we're calling it that, right, or training program. It's the same across the board.
So, Alex, I kind of saw your Alex F. I saw your face when talking about specific spices. Now, as a West African, spice is something I love. Well, as long as it's not spicy or chili, I love seasoning. Let me correct myself. I love seasoning. So, what's your viewpoint on the whole seasoning? Because you're Italian, right? You guys love to season your food.
Yeah, half Mediterranean, yeah.
Yeah, so you guys love seasoning. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was when Dolmio was mentioned, I was like, it's just terrible. Like I know it was just an example. I think Lloyd Grossman's sauces out of a jar are pretty good. Like I'll give him credit. It was just when Dolmio was mentioned, it's just such a bad quality. Like I don't know, it doesn't come out tasting right at all. But it obviously is like a.
Have you ever used Maggie? And I had to
Oh,
say
I
it
know the
properly.
stuff.
I had to
Yeah,
say it properly for my West Africans. Maggie, have you ever used that?
Yeah, I've seen the stuff. Yeah.
Nothing
It's very
but
popular,
salt,
right?
but yeah.
Yeah, very popular for chicken. So yeah, I think some great points were made there. Really, really good points. But it is kind of scary the way like most Brits are just like, oh, I'll pour some Dolmio on. Like, there's a bit more to cooking than that, and it doesn't always have to be that difficult. You can buy a lot of things pre-chopped now. Like you can get in the freezer aisle, you can get like pre-chopped onion and mushroom and things like that. If your knife skills aren't too great or you're in a bit of a rush. So that can start and be a base for a sauce or something while you and then add whatever else. But I think the main thing with chicken is that a lot of it was very popular for years. I don't know if it still is. I'm really out of the loop because I feel like an old man with this. I'm in my mid-30s now and got into this in my teens. So some of the stuff that I sort of think is like the way it's done might. Yeah. All right. Okay.
Nothing has changed.
So the George Foreman, right, is really like mega popular. Like everyone just, I chuck all my chicken breasts on the George Foreman. But like the George Foreman's like, I don't know, it's too cold for steak and it's too hot for chicken. So nothing comes out right on it. You need to know your temperatures and things like that, and time frames for like thicknesses. But normally a good like idiot-proof way to do chicken, I find, is to get a Pyrex dish and cover the top with foil, mix up some vegetable or chicken stock, throw in, pick the leaves of some thyme or something like that, or some lemon thyme if you fancy, and you can get hold of that. It's a bit nicer. Maybe some smoked salt if you're feeling fancy again, but regular salt and pepper will do. And just mix that around the chicken, and it will cook in its own juices, and the foil will stop it getting out, those juices getting out. And then you can pour away what's left and cook it down into like a little reduction. And so you can chop up juicy chicken and then pour on that reduction, and it will look chefy as hell because it's there's all the little herbs in it. And it's like the most simple idiot-proof thing in the world. You just literally put chicken in the oven for like 20 minutes. So that can lift up your chicken game quite a lot. And I wouldn't say there's too much in stock that I'd be too worried about. And even if you did want to be so anal as to track it, it can still fit. Say you've got like a budget for each macronutrient of maybe a couple of 100 grams, and then say fat could be anything from like, I don't know, 50 to 100 grams for most people, depending on how big they are. But I'm sure a little stock pot wouldn't really trouble those numbers. It might shave a bit off the top of each, carbs and fats. Maybe there's some protein in stock. I don't know. But that can be a real good way for chicken. Beef, I find, again, is quite good in a foil wrap in the oven. It's just, especially if you're using leaner cuts. But again, it depends what you're cooking. It's just, I think the main thing is just trying to find some methods and some recipes that are going to result in juicy, tasty food, and realizing that you can still have juicy, tasty food and hit macros. It just needs a bit of know-how with how you prepare the food. I think another thing about putting all the food in the box for like the week ahead, it's kind of good to be prepared, but if you're going to put veg and things like that in a box like a day ahead, it's going to be horrible. A week ahead, awful. Maybe just use the microwave bags on the side when you warm the meal up. And if it's a meal that's got sauce, like along the lines of a bolognese or something, then normally the flavor of that improves and the tenderness of the meat improves the longer it's in a box, for 3 or 4 days. So that can be quite good. Although I know with food hygiene, they say you shouldn't have anything after 3 days, but you know, we're all guilty at home of like having things in the fridge for a week and it's fine. but yeah, anything like that. So I'm quite big on like tomato-based sauces. I think they're very good for flavour. And I've been quite big on boosting protein intake with people using Eat Lean cheese. It's 37% protein and 3% fat. If you pop it in the freezer, when you take it out of the freezer, it will go all crumbly. And then if you run it through a grater, it will go to powder, and it just improves the product. Like if you try and grate it straight, it goes a bit plasticky. But I found this freezing thing. It was an accident, actually. I had a food business and I had to freeze it because they sent me too much. And then when it came to prepare the frozen stuff, I was like, oh, this is incredible. It works a lot better like this. So I've been boosting the content of like lean chilies and things like that, because I think it's, yeah, if you use 35 grams, you get 10 grams of protein and 1 gram of fat. So
what's the name of that cheese again, mate?
Eat Lean.
Sweet.
They do a smoked one, and they do one that's like a Parmigiana kind of alternative as well, that's more concentrated with the protein. If you're in UK,
no, I was just going to say, Alex has been posting pictures of food lately on his Instagram, so you know, you might be giving him some ideas there.
You know, I'm ordering it like right now.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
It's obviously it's not like a fatty cheddar or something like that, but I find it quite useful if you've been like missing adding, you know, like Parmigiana on top of pasta or something. You know, if you feel like you can't spare the fat calories, this is a real good, especially the smoked version. It's a real good stand-in. There's other things, you know, like lean bacon chunks and things like that. I think are quite good for improving the flavour of a chicken dish, you know, or combine, or like slow cooked pulled ham in a chicken dish. So make it 50-50. It doesn't have to be all like dry bland chicken. It can be like do the chicken in foil in the oven, like I was saying, so it stays soft, pull it apart. Maybe if you get sick of chicken, like a lot of us who have eaten to build up over the years and ended up on the 5 meals of chicken a day diet, like everyone does, you know, you can get sick of it. It's very different having dry chicken breast to having wings drowned in butter and Frank's Red Hot sauce. You know, they're very different experiences. Yeah.
I think the one thing, what it's interesting was we're on chicken, right? I think my best investment for about 10 quid was actually just a thermometer. You stick it in your chicken breast, the little wire comes out the oven, and I can't remember what it is. It's I think 75, I think I do it to. When the thermometer beeps 75 degrees, inside the center of the chicken's done, you pull it out. Genuinely, for anyone that hasn't done that, best 10 quid you've ever spent, and you get the juiciest chicken ever. You'll never eat it ever again.
Because Alex looks like he's going to start by.
Mate, I'm fucking spending all my money now.
So, you know, lead into the next question, because that's actually a great conversation. And the whole kind of carbs, protein, fats, what's your thought process on equations for people and just calculations on what people should be consuming, from everyday individuals to athletes? Obviously, we know age, weight, and height kind of plays into it, but what's your general for your athletes, Alex F?
Yeah. So I think this might be quite pedantic, but I find the whole idea of like low, high, like really badly named, because it's never low or high. It's always specifically in the right place, if you see what I mean. So, but I guess I would err on the side of being very high protein. I feel healthier and enjoy having a higher fat diet more, but I know if sporting performance comes into the equation, I need more carbs. So I will drop carbs down and leave more room in the calories for fats. But then also protein does something quite cool where you can overfeed protein and it won't be stored as fat. So that can help fill up appetite sometimes. You know, if you've got somebody who's ravenous, you can add more protein to their diet and you'll still see fat loss. That could be quite a cool thing. But yeah, I'd probably err on the side of, but also rather than just making sure that we hit the protein, carb, and fat targets, I like to have a discussion about the meals they like first, and any guilty pleasures is probably the wrong word, and especially like in today's climate where they're trying to remove all the negative connections to terms in diets and things like that, or you know, diet itself is even being ripped apart for that. But anyway, like, you know, if we say guilty pleasures, for example, there was a professional rugby player I worked with some years ago, and this sticks out in my head because he was telling me how much he loves. Have you ever eaten a dairy milk that's got Oreos inside?
Yeah.
So he loved that.
And you're
He
missing
loved
out,
it.
mate.
Yeah, he loved those he loved that dairy milk with the Oreo inside. So literally, I drew up like a nutrient intake budget, if you will, for where I thought he was. And then, like I said, so it may have been like I can't remember off the top of my head, but let's just say it was 250 protein, 500 carbs, and 80 grams of fat, or something like that. Just say that, for example. If I put in one, you know, single serving Cadbury's Dairy Milk Oreo bar, that's not really going to trouble those numbers too much. You know, there's still going to be a fair amount of room left in the diet. So I put that in first, and that kept him happy. And we brought him back leaner than he'd been coming, you know, before he had his hernia. So I think it's important to put in some guilty pleasures, as long as they're not binge triggers. But then if somebody came to me with an unresolved eating disorder, I wouldn't be the person to work with them. I would tell them you need to go to somebody who's a specialist with eating disorders. You know, like if somebody comes to you for a very specific form of training that you're not equipped to do, you know, you tell them the relevant specialist. I think it's the same with food. But unfortunately, obviously in fitness and sports, there are a lot of eating disorders. So it'd probably be quite wise if maybe some of us did look more into that, and if there was some sort of qualification. But I feel like eating disorders are such a specialist thing that you'd probably never get back to doing the sports stuff that you wanted to do. So it kind of is one of those things to where you're best staying in your own lane. But yeah, I think making carbohydrates available is mega important. Making sure people meet protein targets is mega important, and then making sure there's a nice mix of different types of fats for health in, and doing that with a variety of sources. I know it's very popular now for people to follow that, what they call the vertical diet, where you just pick a protein source you like, so like steak, pick a carb you like, white rice, and you just stack that up until you get to your targets every day. Like, yeah, that's going to be very easy, but you know, there might be some things you're missing out on from, say, like oily fish, or and it would be good to get a variety of protein sources in. And also, if you know, when I mentioned earlier, like maybe sticking one of those microwave bags of veg on the side of a meal or two, you know, picking different types, and maybe snacking on a couple of different types of fruit in a day as well could be good too. Just for variety. But I kind of like to set up like a day's diet. I don't like to do like a weekly meal plan, because I think it's just a mess when you've got like a million different things to cook and prep. But the way I get around the monotony of that is having options. So where it might be like, here's a beef meal, I provide people with a recipe for like burgers, meatballs, meatloaf, you know, things like that for the beef options, perhaps, or you know, like a slow cooked beef for like a Mexican recipe, perhaps, and doing things that way, so that even though it's there as you know, beef or chicken, there might be 4 or 5 different ways to do that as the mood strikes on the day. Or they could just prep up 5, 6, 7 days of one thing that they love and knock themselves out. I kind of leave it up to people to do that. Yeah.
I think one of the things I struggle with, I remember when I tried to do bodybuilding, guys, and you know, I'm like Alex, I love food, right? I struggled finding somebody that understood the food that I like, being West African. Like, I want to eat my jollof rice, I want to eat my eba, my pounded yam, my eforiro. I can see you guys' eyes like,
Mate,
but
I've got
yeah,
jollof rice in my fucking cooker right now.
who made jollof rice for you? I'm not
Me,
talking
I
about
make jollof rice like once a month.
not Uncle Ben's orange rice.
I'm going to send you a picture of it, mate.
You better send me a picture.
Yeah.
But and I find that there's not a lot of coaches that focus on, I hate the term ethnic, but ethnic foods. And I think that's something that, you know, I hate nutrition, so I will never go into that realm. It's just not enjoyable to me. But I think that's one of the things that I always find with other athletes that I talk to, that they just end up sticking to the same boring, monotonous food because they want to eat their food from their culture, but they know that it's harder to calculate, you know? Chris, from your background, right? What would you say do you ever eat like traditional food? And did you ever have that issues, or would you just eat the same boring, and rice and chicken don't count?
So I've got two completely like polar opposite sides. There's my family in Louisiana who the food is rich. I'll go into that in a minute. And then there's sort of the side of my family here where my gran is Japanese but didn't know how to cook when she first moved here. So she learned a variety of Japanese dishes, but after she learned how to cook traditional English food. So I kind of had a very weird mix of things. I used to stay away from typically like southern, like New Orleans, Louisiana food, mainly because every time I would go there and then eat the traditional food, I'd come back like 6 kilos heavier. So like every other year I'd come back and it'd be horrendous trying to lose it. And then I'd come back and be like, all this food is shit. Like I'd just be here being like, what? There's no Popeye's chicken. There's no honey mustard or anything. Nothing's twice fried. What is this? Like you go from having lots and lots of rich food to nothing. But I think the tradition there of having like all of your, like trying to make the most nutrient, calorie dense food possible, like they don't account for the fact that activity levels are not the same as what would have happened when you first made that. So like gumbo, for example, I'm pretty sure will everyone know what that is? So it's every kind of like offcut of beef, pork, chicken, and shellfishes you can find put into basically like a spicy broth, reduced down to it's a thick sauce with rice that also has potatoes in it. Like it will basically just like a half a bowl of that would upset the macros that Alex was giving an example of earlier, and a whole bowl would just completely blow them out of the water. Like so, it's that food I like it, but I wouldn't be like, yeah, I'm going to put this into a diet and it's going to fit the macros I need for performance. That is a case of I'm just going to eat what I want for a couple of weeks, and that's going to be it.
That's how cheating work.
Yeah.
So
There's no way not all of it, but there's no way that a lot of the food that you consider traditional that you would think of as being like good, like tasty, would fit. I don't think.
No, I think that's what's a little bit different about the West African, because I'm just generalizing because there's quite a lot of us there, but our food is quite high in carbs, and that's the only issue. But then, you know, how we love to cook our beef. I always get complaints. I remember when we went warm weather training in Florida and I made a steak. Everybody was so offended. They were like, Tammy, why is this well done? I was like, I eat my steak cremated. I want to look at all your faces.
That's illegal.
Guys, if you could see
illegal.
Alex F's face, his nostrils is just flaring up like, how dare you?
You're losing it, Temmie. I remember I can't remember where you used to live at the time, Alex, but I remember like you made steak and I was like, oh, I actually don't know how to cook it properly. And it was literally like his face turned to like stone. And he was like, right, I'll show you how to do this once. I went into the kitchen, like swept the cats off the counter, got the steak out, was pay attention. And it was like a half hour of just, I'm going to show you how to do this. Don't ever fuck up a steak again.
I remember I went to Gilgamesh and the chef came out and was so offended that I asked for my steak. I said, well done. It came out and it was still pink. And I was like, I don't want to see pink inside this. I want it dead. And he was like, well, his exact words were, why don't you kill it then? I was like, well, it should be dead. But that is the West African side of me, guys. I can't help it. I like my meat done, whether it's boiled, then grilled after, or fried. But going back to things, let's talk about supplements, dehydration, and caffeine, because those three kind of go hand in hand. I'm going to throw this to you, Ben. How do you feel in terms of your training program and Moa's training program, how those three things, supplementation, dehydration, and caffeine, kind of go hand in hand?
Okay, so I'm gonna go really brief on the dehydration, right? Like it doesn't always work with my job, but in an ideal world, if I'm not pissing as near to clear as possible before I'm training, you shouldn't be going into that session. Like we're talking in an ideal world, right? Like you've got to be hydrated going into that session, and therefore throughout the day, however you need to. What is my computer doing? Sorry, guys. Right. However you go into that session, right? You need to have been getting that liquid in throughout the day. And unfortunately, a lot of people make the mistake of, I can just scull 4 litres of water in the hour before I train. It doesn't work like that, right? Like there are arguments for having some sort of negative, negative effects on, just smashing that much water before you train anyway. From the supplementation side of it, I do err on the side of caution, and take fish oils, vitamin D, multivitamins, iron, the lot, supplementation in the morning with breakfast, and I just get it down. Partly because it then makes it makes my then nutrition a little bit easier, because I'm not necessarily worrying about getting all of those little bits and pieces in. It's not necessarily the right way about doing it, but that's what I do just to ensure that I've got all the vitamins in. What I would say from a strength perspective, where the research follows what should you take, personally, vitamin D3 for me is something that people in strength sports certainly should be taking as an additional supplement, to get as much as you need. If you follow some of the scientific research, that's the one that I would say everyone should be taking. What was the other one, Tim? There was a third bit of the question.
I'm just looking at the jollof. Caffeine.
Caffeine.
You know how we're all obsessed right now with, let's not name any brands.
No. So
every single athlete chucking them down.
I love coffee straight anyway. So my personal approach to it is a little bit different, because I will easily smash 6 to 8 cups of coffee in a day just because I love drinking coffee. And therefore, actually, to get the training benefit out of it, I actually sort of cycle myself off it, if you want to call it, a month before any competition. So as I go into that purely peaking and competition phase of powerlifting, actually, I'm then getting some effect of the caffeine. Again, I think it comes down to personal preference. How do you want to take that caffeine? A lot of people will take pills because they don't like the flavor of any of the brands of drinks that are out there. Again, is there scientific research that say caffeine moderated for specific events that it works? Yes, it does. We all know the effects that it has on the body, but again, depending on body weight, how desensitized are you to the caffeine, depending on how much you need to take. And that's certainly not something you should be going into, certainly from a competitive point of view, going into any scenario having not, you suddenly smash 1,000 mils of caffeine down and expect yourself to perform to the required standard. Just throw it out there to any other guys, really, because for caffeine specifically, I love it, and I have probably far too much of it on a daily basis anyway.
I don't know who's worse between you and Paul. I'm going to throw that question to you, Chris. The
whole thing, or just the caffeine bit?
The whole thing, the three, because they all kind of go hand in hand.
Remind me, the 3: hydration, caffeine, and then just supplementation.
Yeah.
Supplementation, it's usually like some kind of like multivitamin if I can find a reputable one. I think the main thing that I found makes a difference is usually like zinc and magnesium, and then supplementing with like some kind of vitamin D, which has been helpful, especially in winter. Everything else that I could say, oh, that might be good or this might be good, I haven't tried it consistently enough. Like there's different stuff that I've tried where I think, oh, this might be helpful, but then I don't try it for long enough. Hydration and caffeine, I'm not the person to speak to about either of those. I don't hydrate myself well enough, and my caffeine use borders on dangerous, yes. My caffeine tolerance is far too high, so I'm probably not the person to speak to about either of those. I'd say hydration for me is just a case of I drink enough fluid to have like a passable level of hydration. The main time when I actually have to watch it is if I'm dropping weight and I'm starting to water cut. Like I've water cut badly enough and dehydrated badly enough where I got cramps in my hands and feet, and I had to like basically, I don't know how to describe it, basically go into like a weird foot stretch, like a calf stretch, and then do this with my hands and just sit like that for 2 minutes and then drink some water and sit like that again whilst my hands undid. Like that's the only time when I've ever had it where hydration has been really, really terrible. Like for the most part, I can get away with a lot. I think sleep is the main thing that I'd say, especially having been in London for like the last 2 years, is the main thing that most athletes, strength or otherwise, that I meet need to sort out. Like I don't know if like Alex F will agree, or well, if all of you will agree, but if you have like your sleep more or less sorted, so your sleep quality is pretty decent and you're getting a decent amount, then you can get away with a lot of other stuff that is really quite messy, and you'll just be able to go through with it. I think there's a case of like Klokov. There's like a story of him. He went to a seminar when he first got to America, and Paul Carter, the strength coach, was doing seminars with him and Poliquin, and he just said he was just napping half the time, like before they'd go to seminars, and then he'd get up like from sleeping in the car, drink a can of Coke, and then go and snatch 180 like in front of everyone at the seminar, or like pause jerk 200 out the rack. And he's just like, how do you do that? Like, what's so important? Like, what do you do? And he just said, if I sleep enough, like the rest of it really doesn't matter that much. If I don't sleep enough, then all of a sudden all the other little bits start to have a much bigger effect. So that's what I'd say. That's the only thing that I really think I place any sort of importance on or look at very heavily.
I'm going to throw it to Alex, but I'm also going to throw to Alex F. The reason why one of the reasons, don't forget you're also on mute. Reason why we're throwing this question out there is because the amount of athletes that consume caffeine at silly times and struggle falling asleep is unreal. So throwing those three things at you, what's your viewpoint?
Yeah, I actually wanted to touch upon that. I think there was a great point made about if your urine is passing near clear, they use pale straw as like the standard. If your urine's clear all the time, you could be hydrating too much. But yeah, with these caffeine drinks, they can present a problem because people may hyperhydrate to get, buy like a litre of Tesco's Red Bull equivalent or something. And then that might be too much fluid to be comfortable. I think the pills are a much better option. Never the powder, because no one's got scales that do micrograms, and it's too risky. But the 200 milligram pills are usually better. You can buy, in the supermarkets, 50 milligram pills, but they're usually quite a rip-off compared to the 200 milligram ones online. But yeah, with pre-workouts becoming a very popular supplement category, obviously loads of them are charged with caffeine, and there was one, what was it, DMAA, that got banned, and they renamed it geranium extract or something, and it had nothing to do with geraniums, but just made it sound natural and healthy because of, the naturalistic fallacy. If you say anything's natural, people think it's healthy, but you could get stung to death by hornets. That would be natural. It's not very good for you. So yeah, unfortunately, that naturalistic fallacy sways a lot of people. But anyway, this means that people might finish work and then go and have a workout at like 7 o'clock, and then their sleep's really disrupted by stimulants, because caffeine might work in your system for like 7, 8, 9 hours. The dosages are usually body weight up to body weight times 6 up to body weight in kilos times 6 in milligrams. Up to is usually an effective performance dose. Some 200 would see them wired for, say they're 100 kilos. For others, 400. For others, push it to 600. But there was a good point made again about cycling off. Like if you cycle off caffeine, you can resensitize to it. And there's definitely studies on, I think, cycling time trials with water, carbohydrate, and caffeine. And obviously, if you're hydrated, there's carbs coming in, and even caffeine that definitely improved matters. And I think we could all vouch for that. In terms of caffeine lasting for so long and not necessarily being so strong, this is why a lot of bodybuilders or powerlifters who aren't fussed about being tested turn to ephedrine, because it lasts nowhere near as long. The effect is a lot stronger, and then it's out of the system. But that's obviously not like, hey kids, try this, because you'll get banned. But
Alex, can you remember Lyle's ephedrine stack?
McDonald.
Yeah.
McDonald. I think he used to have tyrosine in it as well, didn't he?
Yeah, he did that and aspirin, I think.
Yeah. But that was Dorian Yates's fat burner, ephedrine, caffeine, aspirin. That's a very like 90s bodybuilder, amongst other things. But with caffeine, but I'm not sort of condoning the drug usage in a way. I'm just saying I understand why they go for that over caffeine, because you get more of a boost, and it's not necessarily going to interfere with your sleep if it's out of your system in a couple of hours. but obviously I'm not necessarily recommending that. But then obviously you can time it. I think a lot of people have those evening slumps where they feel they need a pre-workout because maybe they didn't eat since lunchtime. So perhaps pack a snack, a shake, some nibbles or something. Nibbles makes it sound so effeminate, but you know what I mean. Something that's going to give you some sort of boost, like even if it's like if your appetite's not big before training, even if it's just like some banana chips or something, you know, for some carbs on the side of a protein shake, or even if it's just you know, literally blending up some fruit into a shake, or you know, even powdered oats blended into a shake can be quite good. Something like that if you don't have time to stop for food or anything like that at work. But say you're going to train at like, a lot of people finish at like 5 o'clock or something, and they're in the gym for 6 or 7 and they're low on energy, so they go for pre-workout. That could just be low blood sugar, and then their free amino acid pool in the bloodstream might be quite low as well, which is then going to mean that their training could tuck into muscle tissue too, because they're and then the carbs aren't available either, and stimulants don't fix that. So a lot of it might just be a case of like a little afternoon snack or a drink or a little pick me up or something. I mean, Franco Colombo, is it 1981 Mr. Olympia won? I think he won 2. But Arnold's training partner for a long time, the little Sardinian guy, he was famous for walking to the gym, snacking on a pound of grapes. Obviously, that hydrated him and provided him with simple sugars for the workout, as well as perhaps antioxidants and things like that for recovery. So sometimes, like, it doesn't even have to be anything fancy, you know, like a few bananas, things like that. But on the note of hydration, there are some very useful supplements. In terms of making your hydration work for you, I quite like citrulline malate, not necessarily for hydration, but it boosts blood flow and then helps remove waste products. So there was a study on people working out, I think it was bench pressing, and basically the people with 8 grams of citrulline malate were able to get a few more sets out because they believe the waste product is being removed from the muscle with enhanced blood flow. So that can just go in the water before a session and definitely improve your, you know, the volume work that you're going to do to add size and strength. I really like that. And so people used to use arginine, but arginine is manufactured from citrulline. So arginine's out of the system kind of quickly, but citrulline will hang around and arginine will get produced out of it. You can add, is it norvaline as well, I think? And there's agmatine, that's the one. Agmatine can improve the effect of that. And agmatine's also an anxiolytic, so that can chill you out, whereas caffeine gets you wired, you know. And for some people, caffeine's the worst idea because they're already anxious, they're already nervous, they've already got game day nerves. Like I couldn't eat on days where I had a game. I had to do everything with liquids and digestive enzymes and things like that. And taking HCl tablets to make sure, capsules to make sure they all got churned up because I'd feel sick. I was so worried about my performance. But then it meant that when it was time to perform, you know, I gave it my all. And I know Johnny Wilkinson was famous for that. I'm not trying to say we were like, yeah, we're on a level. No. But, you know, it's common across athletes. And it's always good if you've got like a famous person as an example that like, oh, maybe I'm not such a piece of shit because someone who was incredible, you know. So other hydration supplements that are very useful, electrolytes, they make your water go further, basically. Your uptake of it is better. And another one that's very useful is glycerol. So that decreases your urine volume and also increases your uptake of the fluid too. And it can also coat your throat so that you're protected from like raspy scratching and things like that and upper respiratory tract infections. So I think these things have all got quite a cool effect. So maybe if you had a drink where there was some, you know, there were some carbs. So this is dependent on activity with the carbs. It could just be something sugary. You know, you might want it to be an isotonic, but then it could be enhanced by being glucose and fructose together. The reason for that is they have different transporters. So if you think of like maybe like there's one fleet of taxis in the town, but then town's really busy because there's like a convention on or something. So there's more people than usual. So more carbs. You need another fleet of taxis. So taxi fleet A can pick up the sucrose, the glucose, and taxi fleet B can pick up the fructose, and you can go with a 2-1 ratio of glucose to fructose And instead of just taking on 1 gram or roughly 60 grams of glucose per hour, which is regardless of the size of the body, that's about what humans can produce or make use of. If you add 30 grams of fructose to that equation for like endurance work or sports, you can then make use of 90 grams of carbs per hour. So depending on the duration of the event, you can look at the type of carbs and the amount of carbs included in the fluid. Something like I said, like citrulline malate might be really useful for performance. There's a little like betaine is getting a lot of attention. That's an interesting one. It can improve strength somewhat. But in terms of like people mention creatine, but creatine's best post-workout with protein and carbs and perhaps a glucose disposal agent like alpha lipoic acid or something like that. And then that just means that the carbs get taken to your muscles better. And obviously if the carbs are getting taken with the water and the creatine and things like that, then you're keeping your muscles saturated with the creatine, which is how creatine and beta-alanine work. You need saturation. So so I think everyone's made some really good points. Like I said, the peeing just about clear or pale straw was a great start. So that's a good one for people to keep in mind. Maybe for some hard numbers, if people weigh themselves before a session and weigh themselves after, if you've dropped 2 kilos in a session, that's not fat, that's dehydration. So maybe take on 1 litre to 1.5 litres during your workout and 500 ml post-workout for your recovery drink. And then that's put those 2 kilos back because 1 litre is 1 kilo, basically. So that could be water, or that could be one of these drinks with the, maybe your carbs or your protein and, protein and carbs and things like that for recovery. So just put your fluids back, stay on top of your fluids. Obviously there was that great point of not just guzzling everything down beforehand. But yeah, I think electrolytes they're not necessarily essential, but I think they're quite good before a session just to make sure that the water gets taken up and used. And particularly if you're training in the heat or playing in the heat, electrolytes are good as well. Like I said, I like electrolytes, I like glycerol. I think citrulline malate's just useful to come along for the ride and perhaps add agmatine to that. There's a few other bits and bobs, like I said, like could be like betaine or beta-alanine, but mostly you're looking at electrolytes and glycerol for the hydration benefits, and then obviously that could come with a little bit of with the carbohydrate in there too. Yeah, so supplements for hydration.
So okay, we're all ex-rugby players here. Weightlifter, one weightlifter, powerlifter, strongman. Game day, competition day. What is the ideal start to the day? Pre-comp, post-comp. What is the ideal setup? I'm going to throw that to you, Alex F, first. Then I'm going to take it to the guy underneath you that's trying to smirk because he knows I'm coming to him next. Second Alex, only Alex. So Alex F, over to you.
Okay. I think I mentioned that when I was talking about the last question, but many people are affected by game day nerves or meet day nerves, and what they want to eat on a day might go out the window because their digestion seems to sort of down regulate, so they're not hungry, they're not producing many digestive enzymes and things like that, and the food might just sit on the stomach. But I think people also place way too much on the day. Obviously on the day matters, don't get me wrong, but the few days in the lead up matter as well for filling up muscle glycogen stores and things like that, and just generally staying hydrated and making sure there's enough protein and things like that. But maybe in the day or two before, maybe protein can take a bit of a back seat and come back in after the event, just to make room for more carbs in the diet. So fat is really, it can come in, but it's only at like a very slow intensity in ultra endurance where fat is a fuel. So where you get people going like, oh, I use purely fat for fuel, and then they do like ultra marathons, like, yeah, okay, but they would still improve their performance with carbs. But obviously whenever you talk about carbs, there are always people that pop up to go like, oh no, you should use fat instead, blah blah blah. But I just don't think they really understand energy systems of the body. So yeah, your game day nutrition or your meet day nutrition, you need to keep topping up the carbs definitely. But if that's in a relatively mixed meal with a bit of protein and a bit of fat, that'll probably stop any blood sugar spikes. And it might also mean that your food's going to be a bit more palatable as well. Like if all you want to eat is like flat jack bites or something, fine by me. Like we've all heard about Usain Bolt, you know, when he was in China, he couldn't find anything he liked to eat and he ate chicken nuggets. That doesn't mean his diet was chicken nuggets all the year. It's just like that's all he could find that he would enjoy.
One of his favorite meals.
Yeah, but like it's all he could find that he enjoyed at this particular time. You know, like oh, there's some Chinese McDonald's, and like because he was obviously in China and like what the hell is all this food? So if you can find some things you enjoy that are going to give you a bit of fuel, I'm not saying chicken nuggets are the ideal thing, but for him, that puts some food into him. In you know, perhaps in an environment where he'd have otherwise not eaten because everything was like, what the hell is that? You know, like there's probably people at markets eating like live octopus and chicken's feet and things like that in China that freaks Western people out, or you know.
Wow.
So yeah, like that's the thing. I guess that was the thing with Bolt, but particularly with powerlifting and bodybuilding as well, people put a lot into people talk about peak week, but then they also put a lot into the day where they try and do these mega carb loads on the day. And it's particularly counterproductive for the physique guys, because if you do a mega carb load on the day, you don't have time to digest it. And a lot of them are under the belief that they need to restrict water and sodium as well. So there's not a lot there to transport the nutrients out of their gut when they go on stage with like a bit of a gut. And they probably look better with an overnight fast actually. And then just taking on some carbs and water and electrolytes just to have a bit of energy and stop them cramping up throughout the comp day, and then attending to recovery and things like that afterwards. But with powerlifting too, you know, it might be better to fuel up in the days before and then just top it up on the day. And the same with sports too. So say with rugby players, if you're training, or this could apply to football, hockey, anything like that, you've got a training session Thursday, maybe you might have a run on Friday. I don't know, it depends on the level you're at. But just after those sessions, make sure you top off the carb stores. And that might mean that you need to eat anything from like 3, 4, 5, or 6 times your body weight in kilos in grams of carbs per day for those days. That could be mega overkill at the start of the week. It might not be, but it could be. Everyone's individual. So basically, I don't give these numbers as like, this is the bullseye. I give it as like, here's a scale, and we'll find you where you live on the scale with this slider. Do you know what I mean? Does that help, that visual? You see what I mean? But for most people, so we look at these ranges, but it could be anything from like, I don't know, like 3 to 6 grams per kilo of body weight, lean body mass, however you want to look at it, for, you know, the days before a competition, you know, like maybe like on the Thursday and the Friday, and then game day, maybe drop your protein down a bit and leave more room for the carbs. And if you don't have any appetite, maybe look to some liquids, look to some snacks, you know, even if it is cookies and flapjack bites and things like that, like if that gets some fuel into you on the day, like, you know, and you otherwise can't eat savory food and things like that. A lot of people have rituals as well. Like you hear about people that are like, oh, I have to have a particular dish, you know, like whether it's spag bol or like beans on toast. Like you hear all these things where people have rituals, or like, oh, I have to put my left sock on first and the right sock. Like sometimes that's just weird, but sometimes you have to roll with it as well. But I think also this feeds back to the caffeine question. Some people try and take on mega amounts of caffeine drinks, and then that's more fluid than they normally take on, and then their bladder can't handle it. So just hydrate as you normally do, and maybe utilize some caffeine tablets, like I said before. But yeah, I think and also the trouble with caffeine drinks is they're carbonated. Carbonation in your stomach before sport, terrible idea. So you need carbohydrates and fluids available to working muscles for when you're going to train, play, perform, and that's really the important thing. So making sure that's available, but doing it in a way where you can still get it down you and not be sick, I think is going to be the key. not placing such a gigantic emphasis on the day, but also looking to the 3 or 4 days before is is a big one too. So yeah, to sum up, like look at the 2 or 3 days before. On the day matters, but yeah, try and look at the whole week. And if that means that you have to eat some things that people might not view as mega healthy, but you find them palatable and only have appetite for them on the day and can get them down you and without being sick, then that's fine by me.
So Alex, coming from a lifter's perspective, obviously, we've got a 2-hour weigh-in, 2 hour before we compete. From your perspective, any tips, advice that you throw to a lifter?
Yeah, sure. So if we are IPF, then you have a 2-hour weigh-in. If we're a different federation,
we only deal with IPF here. Come on.
I mean, you only deal with IPF. I definitely don't only deal with IPF. You might have a 24-hour weigh-in. Either way, for the 2-hour weigh-ins, I think the real goal is better preparation. So you aren't in that position where you need to do something crazy. You don't need to have a huge cut. So basically, stay as close to your weight class limit as you can. If you have done a water cut, and what Ben says, and you've got to really rehydrate quickly. Does IPF allow IAVs?
No.
Weird.
No.
Okay, so if you're going to have your own sugar concentration drink, or your own electrolytes, as Alex was putting it in, you got to kind of test that stuff. Because Ben, I know you did some recent water cut, and part of that I assume was to find out like what level of electrolytes this makes you shit yourself, and what doesn't.
Yeah,
because if you go too crazy on it, like you're gonna have issues. So one, I would just be like super prepared if you're gonna rehydrate quite aggressively. Take some time in the months leading up to the competition to figure out what you can take. Yeah. So what levels of like sodium, sugar, potassium works for you. If you have too little, then like Alex alluded to, it was isotonics making the water go further. If it's not enough, you'll just piss it all out. If it's too much, like you shit your pants. Okay, so that's nice. Other things on that level, if you take too much of these electrolytes, you can have some weird heart stuff going on. Like palpitations and such, like doesn't feel great. Just be aware of that. But this is if you've gone quite heavy in your water cuts. Anything else? Yeah, you could look at like legal supplements in terms of like you can have legal supplements, right? Like you can
IPF. So in regards to IPF, they are one of the strictest federations. One of the things that because I'm quite lucky that I compete in a weight class that I don't have to cut weight for. So I am normally overweight because I get so nervous. So I remember when we went to Sweden for Worlds, coach made me 86 kilos, but I compete in the 84. Within 2 days, I had dropped to 81 kilos. And that was eating a hell of a lot. Literally, they sat me down in an Italian restaurant and they were just force feeding me because I just lose weight as soon as I get nervous. But with IPF, they are so strict on you. And if you are dehydrated and you do get drug tested, good luck. We ended up waiting was it like 4 hours for me? Moa was how many hours?
I've been sat at midnight in some venue in the middle of nowhere going, please just take a piss. Like they'll wait until you can piss. Because
they can't, once they've identified themselves to you, they can't actually leave you. So until you
you have to be at your side until you finish, don't they?
Literally, that's it. They're pretty much your shadow.
If the WADA rules, right, it's as per the WADA book. So
yeah, so it's not just the IPF, it's the fact that it's WADA that's that officiates the drug testing element. But rehydration is such a big part. The amount of individuals.
You guys, yeah, for sure. It's hard in 2 hours. I said for you guys, yeah, it's hard. Like 2 hours, that's not a lot. And
like
like
you
I
see
said,
the amount of people cutting weight and they are struggling, and I just feel so sorry for them, especially in some competitions they do 2 ladies at a time, so you're seeing people strip to their bare minimum to try and make weight, or you're seeing them, like some individuals carry a, you know, those little portable saunas with them. So it's absolutely mental, the things that people do to try and make weight.
It's the
Hold on. There's a portable sauna.
yeah,
yeah
he's like a
Yeah.
sauna suit, mate.
little zipper
Yeah.
boxes.
Yeah.
Oh, God's sake. I've never heard of this.
Mate, we've done it before, like with me and Kitty, because she has 24-hour weigh-in, so we have quite a lot of time to rehydrate. Where we've been sat like in a sauna, her fully clothed, and I've been like, well, I just can't be in here. Like I'm not even dehydrated. I can't stay in there. But or like we'll have the room temperature cranked up, and I'll be fucking not wearing anything, and she'll be like fully clothed and little like what's
Oh,
it,
what?
bin
Doing
bags over her.
burritoing herself. Doing the
Mate, it's fucking
burrito.
nuts. Yeah, it's
So
people do weird shit, man.
The biggest problem with this though is it's not the cuts, right? So okay, you know, I've only done one on myself. You know, I've been with a few people that have done big cuts. And I was like, I'm just gonna do it for my body weight as out. I did 97.4. I got to 93 on the dot. And it was the only reason I performed, because it was all about the rehydration thereafter, you know, and on the old YouTube channel, I go through what I went through and all that sort of good stuff. Now, don't get me wrong, would I do it from 97.4 again? No, I wouldn't. I'd probably want to get anything in the 96s I'd go from, to be fair. Like the hot baths for that last 0.2 kgs was horrible. But nonetheless, I now know that, and therefore I'll start at 96 point whatever next time, and we'll go from there. But where I've seen people make mistake after mistake is they weigh in and then they just sit there. Like I was back up, by the time I squatted, I was back up at 97.1. And
did we talk about following up your did we talk about following up your bath with an ice bath and alternating the two to bring down core temperature?
you know, do you know what? If I'd had the facility available, it would have been nice.
Yeah. It's just it makes you feel way less shit.
Yeah, who was it at the men's British that was literally running around the night before looking for a sauna, like trying to do he was literally trying everything possible.
Dylan's been like that before. Do you remember? Dylan at the Euros has been like that.
Oh,
We do give him a glass and just spit in the glass for an entire day, like stuff like
yeah,
that.
you see that a lot. Literally, they're just spitting, or like I've seen somebody sucking on tissue.
Yeah, the old they call Jolly Rancher, the super sweet Jolly Rancher sweets.
Yeah,
that is the best trick. That's the best
toxic
one.
waste, mate. The toxic waste ones.
Yeah.
I just don't understand, if you're not highly competitive in that weight class, why do things that are so detrimental to your health in the long run? That's just my perspective. Funny enough, somebody asked if I would cut down now that they've got the new weight classes. Remember, Ben, because I was talking about how much weight I've lost. And I'm like, no, I'm competitive in my weight class. And for me, the whole essence of training is to stay fit and to stay healthy and to enjoy it, especially in majority of these sports that don't pay.
And let's be realistic as well. For you to go down, like if you talk about you specifically, tell me, if you to come down, like even when you're light, to get down to that next weight class, which is now 76, you will need to lose muscle mass. So you don't know the effect that's going to have on you. Where some of these other girls, specifically because of the way the weight classes have changed, they've been there at some point in the past. They probably have some sort of
Excuse me, Ben. When I was a sprinter, I used to, which was only 3 years ago, you know, a national level sprinter, I was 75 kilos.
And what did you squat?
I think I did like 120, but our definition of a squat is not what you lifters call a squat. It's called a sissy squat. But we were so excited, you know, that I could squat that. But I definitely, you know how I am. If you say I can't do something, I want to prove it that I can. But it's just not enjoyable for me to want to cut weight. I love food too much. I enjoy food, and I wouldn't do the day I have to cut weight to do powerlifting, I'll stop. I'm like, powerlifting doesn't pay my
I
bill.
mean, apart from the Americans and some of the other top level individuals through the world, let's be realistic. Powerlifting, IPS specifically, is not a non-professional sport, and therefore we do it because of the enjoyment. We're not getting paid for it, and therefore, if you're going to pay for your own flight to Sweden every year or wherever it's going to be, if you're not enjoying it, you're not going to put your hand in your pocket. So there is also that element of it where do the pro footballers or rugby players enjoy every single moment of their training? No, but they're getting their pockets lined at the same time, and that is their job, and therefore there's a different motivation there.
Yeah. I'm going to throw this at you, Alex F, because Ben just threw something at me that I didn't like. So I currently am sitting at 82 kilos. I could easily get to 70. I still think I can get to like 77 kilos without losing too much power and strength. What do you think from your perspective dealing with strength athletes?
Oh, that's dangerous.
Think wisely. I might just like exit you out of the Zoom call.
Yeah. How tall are you?
5'8". I'm athletic. So I used to, I used to sprint, then I played rugby, then I did bodybuilding, then I did CrossFit, and now powerlifting.
That all sounds brilliant except CrossFit. No.
Trust me, it literally was a very short period of time in my defense.
I like the way all the physiotherapists and things like that, like, are real big proponents. They're like, it's no worse than anything else. It's like, yeah, because you're fixing all these people with fucked shoulders. Like, you're loving it. It's lining your pocket. But yeah, I wouldn't see why not. I think it's usually best if people get down to try and get down as close as they can, just to save any water cutting necessary to be in like the bare minimum of like an emergency kilo or something in case. But I think like year-round attention to it, and not not putting on too much to take you above your weight class. But it's hard with strength, because obviously you want to be in a caloric surplus to build muscle, and obviously that comes with some extra weight. But I think the key is to just do it conservatively, like where people like chuck in like 1,000 calorie mass gain, and maybe just try and add 200 or 300 calories and see how that does you. And then but have structured periods of where you're where you're building up your strength and mass and stuff like that, and pull back with like mini cuts throughout the year, just to keep you close to the weight, because it does seem to be a thing that it can be deleterious to performance if your water cut's too big, and it can take a few days to get hydrated and brain function back and things like that to levels that were before. There's some strong research on that. Another thing, it's quite risky to connective tissue and things like that when you're dehydrated, and obviously for a sport where you're going to pull 1 rep maxes, either weightlifting or powerlifting, that can be quite a scary concept. And that's another area that people have found a useful supplement for in the last few years. So there was a British university, and this is so British, like they were putting it in Ribena. So like, yeah, it's like the most British thing in the world. They were putting gelatin packets in Ribena before training with 200 milligrams of vitamin C, and that doubled collagen synthesis. So, we always look after muscles and things like that, but maybe we should be looking after our bones and tendons as well. So we spoke about vitamin D and magnesium supplementation earlier. Obviously that and calcium and things like that are integral to bone, but perhaps collagen and things like that are very beneficial to muscle. So if there's this gelatin's kind of like a cooking ingredient, and it doesn't really mix very well, but hydrolyzed collagen is technically the same thing. So just maybe perhaps more bioavailable or easy to digest or easy mixing, before you take it on. So rather than the 15-gram gelatin packs, I've utilized with people 15 grams of hydrolyzed collagen and a 200 milligram vitamin C chewable. And I also put that in with like a strawberry kiwi protein smoothie. There's something in kiwi that improves vitamin C uptake, and then strawberries and kiwis are rich in vitamin C anyway. Obviously, it's just a nice flavour, and it provides some sugars for training. But yeah, I think you could come down. I think you could come down easily. Like most people can lose 3 or 4 kilos without problems. Even if you look at like mega shredded bodybuilders in the end stages, a lot of them can still normally pull off 2 or 3 more kilos. But yeah, if you're already relatively athletic and in good nick, 3 or 4 kilos shouldn't be too troubling at your height. I think if it was any more than that, it might get difficult. And then obviously you could have that cushion where you might, you know, maybe leave a kilo of water or something for the weigh-in, and then just, you know, or you know, fast or something like that. Whatever you normally prefer to do. Normally after weigh-in, I think it's a good idea to get some isotonics and some Haribo sweets and things like that, and some salts, and then just put all the carbs back in the muscle and rehydrate and get the body weight back up. But obviously people have their own way they like to go about that. But yeah, I wouldn't see why not. Like I said, it just takes some year-round discipline and fitting things into so that you're not so far off the target when the meets come around. I think
Kimberly
a lot
can
of
do it,
fights.
guys. I definitely. No,
You heard it here first then. Temmie cutting to the 76s. It's in. Worlds this year.
I love food too much. How do you think I have this amazing bomb? Because I love food, and I'm not losing this bomb for nobody. So on that note, Alex, thank you so much for coming today. If people want to get in touch with you, because people are going to want to get in touch with you, because that's pretty much what happens, where do people find you?
Twitter, maybe Instagram. It's Alex Ferentino 7. Yeah, that'd be fine. If I don't know if you want to put a link to.
Oh no, we will put the link as well. Yeah, we will put a link for you. But you know, it's just nice when you get to say it and then it just pops up on the screen.
Yeah. So if people just want to follow there, and yeah, it's been a really enjoyable chat. Like everyone's made some real good points. I think there's a great chat there, and there's a lot of useful stuff for any athletic people listening that they could probably just apply or level themselves up with. Like everyone made great points. It was a nice panel to be involved in. Thank you.
So, and that's pretty much it, guys. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you soon, guys.
Bruh.
Say that.